like to do is essentially make sure we're here for you to answer any questions, all you wanted to know and didn't know who to ask. So we will talk a little bit about grant making, but this is also, I think, a time, especially given some of the conversations we had yesterday, to ask questions about the larger Wikimedia movement that you may not know about and want to know, and there are many, many people in this room, apart from Asaf and I, who can respond to some of those questions. So, just to start, my name is Anasuya. I run Grantmaking at the Wikimedia Foundation. They affectionately sometimes call me the Overlord, or Grants Vader. Before I joined the Wikimedia Foundation 2 years ago, I think Asaf used to hum the Imperial theme as I walked in. So essentially, I'm the evil person. But I think what's important to say is that both Asaf and I and many others on our team come from very, very significant volunteer experience in many parts of the world. We have spent many, many moments, months, and years of our lives asking for grants ourselves. So we know that this is difficult. We know it can be tough. We know it can be hard. We know that there is a lot of emotion attached to asking for support in the work that we do, and it's not just support in terms of money, but support in many different ways. And we want to deconstruct that fear. We want to make sure that none of you feel that sense of unease, discomfort, or fear in getting support from the Wikimedia Foundation or from other partners within the movement, many of whom are here in the room today. As Kelsey said, collaborations matter. They don't just matter because funders like them, they matter because that's the only way we can get work done. So just to give you a background to the Foundation's grant making, and then Asaf will go into some of the key tools and materials we have that we hope will support and help you. So the Foundation's grant making work started in about 2009 with a very small program at the time that Eric Muller, who is now the Deputy Director of the Foundation and VP of Engineering, started to support some of our chapters with media organizations around the world. It was a very small program at the time, essentially run by a spreadsheet, and was giving fairly small amounts of money. The next year, I think, was it that Asaf, you joined? Or 2011? Early 2011, Asaf joined and expanded the program to be about a range of individuals, groups, and chapters. And the grant size increased, but also the accountability around this money increased. And the way Asaf did that was to think through a process of peer review or participatory grant making. And by that we mean that a committee of community members review the grant proposals that people send to us. That committee at the time was called the Grants Advisory Committee, and that committee continues to exist today, and we'll talk a little bit more around it. Now, one of the important things to remember is that with our grants, we embody through the process of our grants the values of our movement. That makes it both the most interesting and exciting way to get a grant, and sometimes the most frustrating and challenging way to get a grant. Because every grant proposal that comes to the Wikimedia Foundation on Wiki goes through review and assessment by community members like all of you. So each one of our grants programs has a committee of community members. We are possibly, and the citation is still forthcoming, but we are possibly the world's largest peer review funder. Which means that at any given time, about 60 community members are looking at different kinds of grants. And whenever that comes back up, I'll talk through those. That means that the way that the grants program is set up and how you respond to questions, how we work with you to help you with your proposals is a very important part of the entire process. It's not just about getting money, it's about making sure that what we're getting, all of us together, are getting out of the grants process is effectiveness, is ways to support you to do your work better. The most important thing to say overall is that none of us in this room and outside this room, as we talk about resources at the foundation, should feel afraid to ask. It is not something to think about as a process of charity. This movement, this mission only gets forwarded, it only gets advanced because of the work all of you do and the work that 80,000 volunteers around the world do. So it's really important to think of it that way. The Wikimedia Foundation does not see itself as a funder in the traditional form. We are very much part of the movement, and we mobilize resources for the movement and distribute resources for the movement. So again, we do not see ourselves as a traditional funder in any sort of way. So going back to the kinds of grants that we have 4 main grants programs: the travel and participation support, the individual engagement grants, the project and event grants, and the annual plan grants. And as you can see, it's on a spectrum from individuals to groups to large formal organizations. And the reason it's this way is so that we have each of these programs designed to support different parts of our movement, to support different kinds of needs in our movement. So, for instance, if an individual Wikimedian wants to go to a non-Wikimedia event and actively participate, talk about the Wikimedia mission and the work that they're doing, the Travel and Participation Support Program is what you apply to. If, on the other hand, you want to do something significant with online impact, which might be, for instance, building out a tool, it might be doing research on, say, Wikisource, which is one of the things that we did recently, or it might be how to get journal subscriptions to active contributors across Wikipedias, which is another grant that we gave recently. You apply to the individual engagement grants. If you are a group or a chapter or a thematic organization or a user group that wants to do mainly offline activities that are outreach, that are working with GLAM, with galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, to build partnerships, to do editathons, to do workshops, to do any sort of thing that helps us grow our community and our content, then you apply for project and event grants. If, on the other hand, you are a formal organization that wants to have full-time staff and support for your annual plan, you apply to the annual plan grants or the FTC process. So each of these different programs has committees, as I was saying to you. The Travel and Participation Support Program we do in collaboration with Wikimedia Deutschland and Wikimedia Switzerland. The IEG, or Individual Engagement Grants, has a committee of, I think, 17 community members from around the world in different Wikimedia projects right now. The Grant Advisory Committee is what supports the project and event grants and has 28 members currently. And the FDC, or the Funds Dissemination Committee, affectionately known as the Fund Dissemination Committee, for those of you who've been following the work over the last 2 years, has 9 members from around the world. The way that each of these work is that the Travel and Participation Support Program is ongoing, so you can apply for it anytime you like. The Project and Event Grants Program is also ongoing. It's on a rolling basis. You can apply for it anytime you like. The Individual Engagement Grants and the Annual Plan Grants process is basically twice a year. So you apply for them in 2 different rounds, depending on which round that you want to get supported. Currently, at this point, I think for all those in the room, by and large, most of you are thinking about the first 3, possibly travel and support, participation support, IEG grants, and project and event grants. And what I'd like Asaf to talk a little bit more now is around the project and event grants, as well as some of the other resources that we have to support the work that all of you do. One of the important things I leave you with and come back to later is that we really, as the grant-making team, do not see this as being about money. We see it as being about resources. We see it as being about connections, that we want to make sure we are matchmaking for you, if you like, that we are connecting you with the ideas you have and the resources you need. Money may be one of the key resources you need, but as we've heard about from all of you yesterday, very often it's not money. It's often other resources. It's capacities, it's skills, it's connections with other organizations that can support you, it's groups that can give you in-kind resources. There are many different things that you need to do a project well and effectively, and often with the volunteer movement, and I'll say this, having been in volunteer movements of different kinds most of my life, too much money is often as detrimental or dangerous to a volunteer movement as too little money. And so really thinking about what do you actually need for success? What is it that will make you successful? How do you know you will be successful? Is a really key question to ask yourselves as you do the work you do for the Wikimedia mission. So, Asaf, if you walk us through the project and event grants and then some of the different resources we have, we can come back to some questions. Are there any burning questions right now before we just talk a little bit more and then we'll just open it up? No? Go ahead. All right.
Okay. So project and event grants is, as Anasuya said, a program that can support you in pretty much any off-wiki activity. That can be a community event like this one. That can be a series of editing workshops. That can be an online writing competition. It can be a larger conference. It can be a partnership with a museum. It can be absolutely any kind of off-wiki work that is aligned with our educational mission. So there's plenty of information here on the MetaWiki. It used to be available in many other languages, but we have recently redesigned and improved a lot of this information, and so we have to now retranslate everything, and that's work that we're only just starting. So right now it's mostly available in English, but in a few months, relying on our usual volunteer translation process, which all of you can contribute to, it will be available in other languages as well. So a few words about the process of applying for a grant. First of all, we are a very accessible and friendly grant maker to this movement. That means you don't have to sort of plan everything to perfection in secret and then submit the grant proposal to the great, scary organization and sort of wait for a yes or no answer. That's just not how we work. Instead, we actually encourage people to approach us even before they submit a grant, to run ideas by us, to ask us, I'm thinking of doing this. Does that make sense? Is that something that's been done before? Do you think I should apply for a grant or not? We can often offer you a lot of context, a lot of links and pointers to people who have done this or something like this before, give you resources, give you examples that would actually help you even in that initial phase of creating your grant proposal. So, you create your grant proposal basically by following a template, right? We provide the template and you just fill it in with your details, how much money you need, what your goals are, what you intend to do, how you're going to measure your success, how would we know once the work is done whether it was successful or not. And of course, the budget, right? What are we actually paying for here? There's plenty of information on how to do that under here, under the grant planning link. And I'll send this link by email to all of you, so you don't need to worry about sort of remembering what the pages are called or anything. We'll send it to you. But we have instructions for you here on how to plan your grant, what you need to know about what we do and don't fund, how to create the proposal, how to create the budget. We have some program resources for you that we have already prepared about certain well-understood program models that I'll get into in just a moment. But first I wanted to show you this place called the Idea Lab. The Idea Lab is a space on the MetaWiki where we encourage you to draft your ideas even before you create a grant proposal. It's just a place to literally hatch an idea, right? You've had an idea, you're not even sure you can do it, you're not even sure you want to do it, maybe you don't have time to do it, but you still have that idea that you'd like to share, and maybe other people will want to follow up on it. This is the place. And as you can see, you can share ideas, you can meet people. By pure coincidence, my face is on there. It's a random face every time. I don't know, I didn't plan this, but you can meet other people in the Idea Lab. So it's also a place to sort of meet potential collaborators, right? So as you can see, I, for example, in the Idea Lab, I'm a long-time Wikipedian, blah, 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 and I'm also interested in bots and tools and in library metadata. That's a pretty odd interest, but then I'm a pretty odd person, right? And not every Wikipedian is interested in library metadata. I am. If you happen to, be into that, you've found a potential collaborator. Other people will introduce themselves and talk about their own interests. So the Idea Lab is also a good place to meet potential collaborators. And so you can look at ideas that other people have shared on the Idea Lab. And here are some new ideas. These are ideas that have just been submitted. Just a few days ago, user Blue Raspberry submitted an idea for community support services. User Jefe submitted an idea for Wikipedia refugee education. We have all kinds of ideas here. And if something strikes your interest, you can just click on it and find a description of this idea. This is not a grant yet, this is just an idea, right? What is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the solution you are proposing? And what would it look like? What would it require? And you start collaborating on it. You start writing it up, exploring what it might take, and you can join other people's ideas, right? You can sign up. You see on the right, this was created by user Okasi, but it was already joined by Gerald Shields and someone named Ninkov, right? So you can actually sign on and join other people's ideas and sort of be part of that, whether or not you end up, whether or not you're in the same country even. So this is the Idea Lab. It's a very good place to flesh out project ideas before committing to a budget or a plan. And at some point, this can mature into a grant proposal. So, no, I'm good. And so, what would it actually look like when you actually apply for a grant? Well, you develop your idea, you look at policies, you make sure you are eligible to receive a grant. Short answer, all of you here are eligible to receive a grant from the project and event grants. The only way you would not be eligible to receive a grant from the project and event grants is if you are a for-profit corporation. Since none of you, I think, is a for-profit corporation, we're all good.
We know corporations are.
Yes. What is doing the feedback here? Oh, so we can. And so after you've requested funding, we go on to the review stage. As Anasuya mentioned, one of the first things I did when I joined the foundation was introduce this element of community review of grant proposals. Instead of some one person at the foundation making a decision on their own, I wanted the voice of community volunteers, the experience of community volunteers to be heard in the discussion about the grant. The decision is still made by the foundation, but it's very often informed by advice, criticism, ideas by these volunteers. And so this review would take place on Wiki. I'd like to demonstrate this. Another thing that Anasuya mentioned was that we do our grants in the open. It's all public on Meta. That's also fairly unusual. Most grant makers don't do that. You can read about all of our current and past submissions here. And this is literally a list of all the grants we have funded in the Project and Event Grants program ever. These are some grants we're currently considering right now, these 4, but there's a list here of grants we have already funded this year, and below it a list of grants we have funded last year. And you can read all about those grants and even the conversations that we have had about those grants in the past. So if you are interested, for example, to see how, yes, I was going to demonstrate. Here we go. Yeah, so as you can see, this conference was funded by Project and Event Grants. Grant, and you can look at the grant proposal that Dumi has submitted, Wikimedia South Africa has submitted a while ago, and you can read the context that they gave and look at the information and how much money we gave for this conference and what the need is and what the parameters are, what the goals are, what the budget is like, so you can find out, for example, how much the food cost, right? You have actually all the details about this grant. They're all out in the open, in public. Additionally, you can use the talk page, like everywhere else. You can use the talk page. On Meta, it's called discussion, but you can use the talk page to look at the conversation that we have had about this very grant proposal by this advisory committee. So as you can see, some people were for it, some people were against it, people made a variety of comments, and the applicant, in this case Dewey, that's his username here, responded to these comments, right? So people ask questions, and the people asking for the grant are answering the questions. It's a dialogue. I mentioned this briefly yesterday. Our goal in this dialogue is actually to improve the grant proposal, to make sure that we are funding the best, most impactful activity we possibly can. And so at the end of a discussion, as you can see, there was quite a bit of talk. We approved this. We all are.
By the way, we use on the grants as well. So if you have questions about how that works, there you go, ask you that to us.
And so once the grant is approved, and our approval rates are very, very high, we almost always find a way to say yes. For $30,000, and during discussion we may come to an agreement that it would make sense to start with a somewhat reduced version at $10,000. And you can actually change that. It's not set in stone. And like I said, we try to find a way to say yes to a proposal, even if it's not quite the original amount or the original proposal that was offered. But you shouldn't be afraid to sort of come up with some number and be rejected solely on the basis of that number. Do you have a question?
I'm just curious about, do you only fund Wikimedia projects, as it were? Because, I mean, My brother and I run a wiki, but as an aside, my brother did some work up in Kenya with the Museums of Kenya to set up a project to record and share local history under the title of Indigenous Knowledge. That Kenyans can correct me. I think it's called Elimu Asilia or something like that. But yeah, and all in Swahili. It's recorded in Swahili. So that's kind of sitting out there, and I've been in touch with them. They're cool people. I think the Goethe Institute funded it for a while, but I mean, you know, they might benefit from something and some kind of grant to continue that kind of work and expand what they're trying to do, and then, you know, you could work out the licensing and incorporate that into Kiswahili Wikipedia. I mean, is that...
So the answer is yes, we do fund outside Wikimedia groups, right? You don't have to be a user group or a practicing Wikipedian to get funded. There is the expectation that in some way, somewhere along the line, this somehow feeds into, incorporates, relies on, or serves the Wikimedia online projects, which you just said it would, right?
Yeah.
The
I mean,
we're sketching would ultimately feed into Swahili Wikipedia.
Yeah.
The quick hint I would give you about that is to talk to our friend Ingo here, as a representative of the community, because whatever we think of injecting into a wiki, and this is something we have learned with bitter experience, absolutely depends on the community's interest and willingness to receive that content. And they may have all kinds of concerns about it, or may want all kinds of vetting processes or something, but something can be worked out. So yes, that's an example of something that, you know, I can't sort of pre-approve this, but in a reasonable budget, with a reasonable plan, and with community buy-in, we would consider funding, yes.
Okay.
I'll give you another example of something that's not quite Wikimedia work that we have funded. Some time ago, I think about 2 years ago, a community member proposed that we fund the creation of a free font for the Batak language, an indigenous Indonesian language that is not in active use anymore. It's like Sanskrit, it's a classical language. He wanted a free font for Batak to exist so that existing historical texts in Batak, and there is a rich literature in Batak, could be transcribed digitally, could be put on Wikisource, right, on the project, the Wikimedia project that houses literature. Clearly, there's not going to be a Batak Wikipedia. No one, you know, is going to consume free knowledge in Batak, but it's a very worthwhile and completely in line with the Wikimedia mission goal to preserve Batak literature. And a technical obstacle on the way to that was that there was literally no font that could be used, certainly no free font. And so the entirety of that project was to find a professional, experienced font designer and Unicode expert, one of the world's best, who was interested in the work personally and just sought, you know, reasonable compensation for the tremendous amount of work that it would take, and to just pay him to produce that free font on the expectation that it would then be picked up by interested people who would be interested in transcribing some of the existing Batak literature, some of which that Wikipedian had access to because it was in a museum in the Netherlands for colonial reasons.
Yeah.
And so we funded that. And I'm giving this as an example of something that was technically, literally, we funded the creation of a font. Nothing directly to do with the projects, but it was an infrastructural need for a certain amount of Wikimedia work to happen. There's also a learning attached to that grant. This was 2 years ago. The font was created on budget. Everything's okay. It's available. But none of that work happened because the person who created this project was interested in this in theory. I mean, he's not a Batak speaker, he can't read it or anything. He was interested in the font being made available on the assumption that there's all these Wikimedians waiting to transcribe Batak literature. As it turns out, those Wikimedians are not around yet. Nevertheless, that font now exists, and whoever ends up wanting to do something digital with Batak in the future will be able to use that font. So it's still a reasonable investment, and from our perspective, in terms of supporting some future work and committed to our multilingual vision. Right. But ideally, in the future, let's put it this way, in the future, if someone comes up with this sort of proposal, and in fact there is an open proposal right now by another scholar interested in creating scripts, not fonts, but scripts on the Unicode standard to represent some world languages that are not yet in Unicode. So again, very hard to use online. This time, I'm literally asking that scholar, suppose we fund this, suppose this gets added to Unicode, then what? Can we find a community of stakeholders that would at least, generally express interest in actually utilizing those resources? If we can't, maybe we shouldn't fund it just yet. Maybe we should do some outreach work to find those people. Maybe they would actually have valuable input into this project, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a bit of learning there, but this kind of investment in infrastructure, particularly around language issues, is definitely something we could do.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems to me that there is a lot of stuff out there, and increasingly people are putting content into the public realm, but possibly not on Wikipedia, but using platforms like Free WordPress, Tumblr, etc., etc. So there's an opportunity there to try and incorporate that stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I mean, just to comment on that, there is quite a bit of content, for example, in Swahili, which has been developed by NGOs with external funding. Of course, I personally tried a few times, not very often, to make contact free, say, hey guys, you have good material, what do you think, putting it up here. But as I know the mindset of such projects, they are very much centered on themselves. The problem which there may be, and where they may be a bit more receptive, is that sometimes the funding of this project ends. And where are the contacts going to stay? Are they sure that somebody is there who's going to keep up their websites and continue their content? I mean, there's some pretty good health stuff. For example, I looked through, because at the moment we have this translation initiative of the Wiki Health Project, who try to translate 80 core articles into different languages, and they also bring it to Swahili, and well, it's a bit, it's good stuff, but on the other side, it's the question of the wisdom of translating very long English language articles word by word, because how does it fit culturally? Who's going to read that? Because doctors cannot read it because they don't know Swahili enough. Poor patients cannot read it. The only ones who have a chance, maybe nurses with a certain training, who get parts of their training maybe in Swahili. Okay, whatever. There is good stuff, at least for giving introduction into the problems in NGO websites. But I wouldn't know how to make contact. You have to know the people. And of course, if you have a chance to tell them, okay guys, if maybe your project comes to an end, and you try what to do with the data you have assembled, could be a chance to convince them, okay, we put someone who tries to wikify their content and put it in. But it's not easy, because probably they will only be receptive towards the end of the project. Once they're on a project, they look at their project, they're the greatest, and they're the only ones. That's the psychology of projects in Africa. And everybody invents the wheel 5 times a week in different parts of the place.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And we would be open to helping with that sort of thing. I mean, if you know those sites, you know the language, you know the culture. If you approach those organizations and needed some kind of support from us, formal letters or whatever, to say, yes, we will take care of this content and we are a non-profit, etc., etc. Or help, sort of selling the Creative Commons license, etc. We can certainly help with that sort of thing. And that does seem interesting to me. But again, I insist that the community, the local community, needs to be involved in this. And you gave an excellent example yourself. A Canadian doctor couldn't think why it would not be right to translate an excellent English language article on dengue fever into Swahili, complete. And you see that there's very good reasons to maybe not do that, or not do that quite that way, right? So this is a perfect example of why we need community members to weigh in and to buy into all these initiatives from the outside. And we have learned over and over again at the foundation that we really have to insist on that component of people from the culture, from the region, being involved in that kind of intervention. There was a question to your right.
I wanted to ask something here. I'm curious. Looking at the fact that in Botswana we have an active Wikipedians, so looking at the fact that me and my partner we're here in Wikidaba and we're the only ones who can spread the news about Wikipedia. So, but we're willing to commit after this conference, after this knowledge that we've gained here. But I'm quite curious, because is it going to be hard for us to get grants for travel and doing projects, or should we convince you guys maybe for a few months that we're committed? Then are we going to have the grants afterwards after showing you guys that we are committed, or is it going to be? I don't know. I'm not sure if it's.
So it's a great question.
Should we prove ourselves first, or?
Kanya, it's a great question. And the thing is, I don't think you have to prove yourself to the foundation. You have to prove yourself to you.
Yeah.
That's where you start, right? It's
Yes.
more around, are you both committed, and do you have the energy to spend a little time to build up a small core of all of you who are interested in this, right? So for instance, you do meetups. If at your meetups you were editing an article together, then even in a few weeks or a couple of months, you would already have substantive work that advances your skills and abilities and interests as editors, and you would be able to inspire others to be editors or contributors of different kinds. It doesn't have to be Wikipedia, it could be Commons, it could be Wikivoyage, right? So I think the commitment you need to show is not so much to anybody else. It's your own, it's your personal commitment to yourself and your own personal inspiration that allows you then to inspire others. I do think, however, that as for anybody who comes to apply for grants, part of what we do look at is some level of commitment, right? Is some level of understanding. But it's also a question of what kind of grant you're asking for and what you hope to do with it, right? So it's not a blanket yes or no. If you come to us in 6 months, will we give you a grant? The question would be, what is the grant for? How do you know that that is something you want to do? And so on. Shall we just take a round of questions, because I think who's being timekeeper? Do you have your screaming voice on? Okay, so. So do you want to just get all the questions and then we can quickly respond?
I think this question is going to fall in line. As part of the discussion that we've been having since we got here for this Wikimedia program, someone said that oftentimes Wikimedians from Africa don't really get enough slots for traveling to outside Africa for international programs, because we do not have enough active editors. I actually want to believe that perhaps more funds should be available to people or country or continents that do not have active editors, because if we are motivated, even because we have interest in it, we want to do it, more funds should actually be allocated to us.
We'll respond to that. Let's take a
Okay, my question is that it doesn't necessarily always to be a project fully financed by Wikimedia. When you apply, you might need to have some portion to be sponsored. So is there any constraints when you affiliate with the sponsorship that will be in line with that certain project, like companies, alcohol, and all that? And the other is, how is it accessible you guys are to attain events as part of the sponsorship, like if we need trainer from the Wikimedia?
And my question is about the role of funding and the role of Global South Partnership. I would feel that it would be a great combination if there were a huge amount of money given to Africa. That would be a very successful from my point of view. But I find it actually not really a supportive situation, and I would like you maybe to comment on it. Also, where do you see the advantage in this, and if you don't see that there's actually a gatekeeper situation and that the Global South cannot indeed speak freely, because obviously if you depend on the answer of the person that is linked to the funding, that doesn't really create a very open discussion, because obviously you risk that you say the wrong thing or you feel that. See, I think if you are discussing a strategy, but you're discussing the strategy with a person that is linked to the funding, you want to be careful in what you say, and also meeting his expectation and responding in a way that obviously, sorry, Asaf, I don't look at you because obviously it's a strange question, but I think there is a problem, there is an issue there, so that it doesn't really create an open conversation, because obviously then you risk to give the wrong impression, or there is a situation in which I'm not saying that Asaf is like this so that he would not accept criticism, because I'm really critical on his towards him, but I don't have conflict, so I don't care, I don't need the funding, so I'm...
Okay, the last one. Yeah, with you.
Mine has to do with travel assistance. Both of you are not from the legal team from the Wikimedia Foundation, but maybe you can give me any ideas to what kind of assistance the foundation offers to Africans who want to travel to events like Wikimedia, because it's a difficult problem for Africans to get visa with the embassies. They are very difficult sometimes, and so I want to find out what assistance does the foundation provide in such regard, because in 2012 I was told that the Wikimedia Foundation legal team cannot do follow-ups or follow-up with the local embassy of the US to try to explain to them issues of relating to who is coming and when and how and stuff like that. They were like, no, we can't do that. And so I'm wondering, if they can't do that, then why offer the scholarship? Because the visa involves two parties, the one going and the one invited. So the one going does its part. The inviting also has to do its part, not just a paper weight.
Yeah. All right, so let's take these questions one by one and very briefly. I don't accept the model of send us on an international conference and then maybe we'll edit. I don't accept that as a model for motivating editors. I think international travel is certainly a fun aspect, a way of knowing whether we indeed achieved some impact on our mission through funding whatever it is that we funded. And so these reports are important for us, they're important for the grantees themselves. It's never fun, nobody likes writing reports. I don't like writing reports, I write them anyway when I need to. But it creates accountability and it serves the public record, because just like all of our requests and discussions about the requests are public, so too all our reports are also public. Sure.
Is that there are three elements to a report. One is accountability, especially when you're part of a movement. There is accountability to all of us as community members and to our donors, many of whom we are. But also there are two more elements that are really important. Self-assessment and learning. And the self-assessment is, how does Wikimedia South Africa, for instance, or the organizing team felt that they did? And doing the report is an important way of thinking about, did we get where we wanted to go? Did we not? Why not? Did we do more than we expected, which is fantastic. And the third piece, which is, I think, critical for a movement like ours, which is as diverse, complex, and important as it is learning, is movement-wide learning. So the reports are not just dry text on Wiki, or they shouldn't be. And there are ways that we're thinking about livening it up, making it easier for all of us to do quick and easy reporting back. And Asaf will talk a little bit about that as well. But the movement learning piece is really important. If, for instance, someone else wants to do a regional conference like this, what does looking at the Wikimedia report tell them? What do they do? What are the tips that they can take that help them do the work that they do? This is not about replication, because nothing was, as, literally, here's the recipe to make, beef jerky in Bartov. But it's about resonance and adaptation. What resonates in your context and what can you adapt? And that's a really critical part of reporting that we don't often think about.
So here's an example for a report. So the grant for the Indaba obviously does not have its report in yet. But a previous Wikimedia South Africa project, Wikilogs Monuments 2013, has been concluded, and so we have a grant report. It's all in public. You can all read it and find out how it went, and how much money was spent, and what went well, and what went not so well, and what Wikimedia South Africa has learned from it. And you can see some pictures. And if you were wondering what Douglas looks like without the beard, here we go. As you can see, we literally ask people to share the lessons they've learned. What went well? What did not go well? And what would you do differently? This is especially important in a project like this, Wikilogs Monuments, which you would likely repeat the next year. It's very important to explicitly call out these lessons. And so you can read all these details, and sometimes people include graphs and pictures, which is very nice. And you can also see the exact report on expenses, like of the original budget, of the original plan, how much was spent, what was different, and why. And you have all these notes. So this is a good example. It's a good example of a good report. Well done, Dewey. And like I said, you can review these past reports, not just for accountability, but also for inspiration, to see how others have done it and learn. And because reading these reports, just looking for some potential insight is a little bit of a large time investment, we have actually done some of that for you, and we've come up with this toolkit for some well-understood programs. You can find this here under the planning section. You can see program resources, and we've provided so far 5 toolkits, and we're working on some more, where you can actually, if you're thinking, for example, of holding a writing competition in your community, on your wiki, we have come up with some suggestions for you. For example, what are useful metrics to track in your project, so you don't have to reinvent all this? What are some tools that you probably need to know about? And I'm sure at least some of you are not aware of these tools. These tools exist and should be used in a project like this. There is a tool that we developed at the foundation called Wikimetrics, which allows you to keep track of the edits and contributions of new users that you have trained or introduced to Wiki, if you want to find out a year later how many of them are still editing, how much they've contributed, you can do this very easily with this tool. You should know about it. You should promote your event using central notice. Does everyone know what central notice is? Probably not. You should take a look. It's that mechanism that presents banners at the top of wiki pages. And we have ways, for example, of localizing it. So just recently, Wikimedia South Africa took advantage of this and promoted their activities within South Africa on English Wikipedia. So not everyone looking at English Wikipedia all over the world had to see, a banner probably irrelevant to them about some activity in perish the thought, Cape Town. But only people from South Africa got that message, right? I'm taking sides here. So it's a tool. It's a tool that's available and yet is invisible unless you hear about it, right? Until the moment when someone tells you, hey, there's central notice, you should use this, you wouldn't know. So we've come up with these toolkits for you to give you a pre-packaged list of things that you should probably use. We also point you to some recent grants and reports that you may want to read, again, if you are thinking about a writing competition. So in this example, if you're thinking of doing a writing competition, you should, for example, look at a successful grant that we've had in the past called the Arabic Wikipedia Producer Prize. And that was, you have a link to the grant, and you can read all about it. By the way, this is a grant that's not to a chapter or even a user group. This is a grant given directly to 2 community members from the Arabic Wikipedia who have just run this, who have just organized the writing competition. They didn't need to be a recognized anything. They didn't need to have a legal organization. We just directly supported them in their Wiki initiative. And as you can see, it's a small grant, $1,200, literally just for prize money for this writing competition. It all took place on Wiki, so there were no expenses for venues, refreshments, travel, anything like that. And it was essentially a long-term writing competition taking place over long months on the Arabic Wikipedia, encouraging people to contribute and create new articles, create featured articles, upload images, etc. And as you can see from their report, which is also linked from the toolkit, it was a success. You could actually see that they've created 4,200 new articles, of which they've developed 15 featured articles, etc., etc. You can see the numbers here. Yes, the goal was to have 1,000 new articles in this competition. What they actually achieved was 4,200 new articles. So this clearly was a successful writing competition, really getting a lot of energy out of the Arabic Wikipedia community. We have some colleagues from the Arabic Wikipedia here who can tell you more about this. So this is just an example, right? We had this grant report, we put it up there on the toolkit for you in case you are thinking about a writing competition. We are offering you this example. All right. Finally, some of these grant reports generate learnings that are probably worth distilling into small bits or best practices, as the business world would have it. Just little bits of wisdom that the Wikipedians who have come before have learned, sometimes the hard way, and are offering you for your activities. And we have tried to organize those bits of wisdom in a place we call the Learning Patterns page. Again, I'll send you links to all of this, but the Learning Patterns page is basically a list of useful patterns related to Wikimedia activities. So here's a pattern recommended by Anasuya: creating new articles. What problem does this solve? New editors are intimidated by creating new articles, but there is a general way to walk them through that seems to be very successful. So someone has figured it out, and they are sharing their wisdom with you, right? In a series, it's like a little recipe, and you can follow this and have a template and sort of have everything prepared for them so that they can walk through the steps of creating an article, and in the end have a reasonably well-shaped Wikipedia article and feel integrated. And you can actually look. This has a link to a grant, and you can look at someone who has already done this and has shared those materials. So we really try to bring all of this up in several different pages, several different contexts, so that you have those resources when you plan your grant. You don't have to stare at a blank page and sort of invent everything anew, right? There's a lot of work that has gone before, and we have tried to process it for you and package it in easy to digest packages. I think at this point we'll just switch to questions and answers. Absolutely anything you want to know about funding, about projects, about what we can offer, about the foundation in general, about the movement. I know there's all kinds of questions. I'm sure some of you have heard terms thrown about yesterday that you were not sure about what they meant. So please don't be shy and ask. This is a good opportunity to learn. And if you don't know what something means, there's probably someone else in the room who also doesn't know. So ask on their behalf. All right, so let's take questions.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually just a bit nosy, I must admit. I recently got a grant, and I was kind of preparing myself for like 4, 6, or 7 weeks of answering questions that I've answered at 1,000 places before. And you know, when you look at my, it's this Indigenous Knowledge for Wikipedia workshop, Asaf certainly knows what's going on. Yeah, that one. And if you look at the talk page, at the discussion page, actually it says like, no, bad idea, policy break, no idea, go away, go to Wikiversity. And you know, I just started to take every single argument and answer it. And while I was doing it, I got the stamp. Granted, approved. There's not a single member of the Grant Advisory Committee who actually approved that. So I wonder, what is the role of the Grant Advisory Committee? Have they been kind of bumped by a train in this particular case, or why are they there? They all said no, and you gave me anyway.
Yes, a good question. So the answer is suggested in the name of the committee. It is an advisory committee. It doesn't get to make decisions. And it's there to provide input on proposals, input that I generally take very seriously. And this case, your case, for example, is one of the rare exceptions where I have made a decision approving or disapproving or not approving a grant without a clear message from the advisory committee. This can have one of several reasons. First of all, the Grant Advisory Committee is a volunteer committee. And as we all know, volunteers have limited time resources and also limited attention and motivation resources, right? Sometimes you're just not up to reading a grant discussion. Or someone has been unpleasant on one of the talk pages and you just don't feel like engaging with it anymore. And that happens to our committee as well. Again, Dumisani serves on that committee. He can share with you some of his experiences. And he's certainly one of the consistently constructive and helpful members. I've even given him a Barn Star once for a super helpful response. So sometimes the GAC, the committee, just can't bring itself to evaluate the proposal through, right? They share a few initial opinions, and some of these GAC members in this case, right, they had some concerns, and they were addressed, but they never sort of came back to say, oh, now I get it, now I do approve, right? They just never actually did that. But sometimes I just have to assume, right, that they asked a question, it was adequately answered, in my judgment. I gave them a few days to say otherwise. They didn't. And I just move on. So that's one element of it. Another element is that sometimes I, as a grant maker, have to make a decision that may not actually be what the committee was leaning to. I don't think actually this is the case, but there has been at least one case where I think at least half the committee spoke up and said, yes, this is good, let's do this, we like this, let's support this, and I said no. I actually went against what the committee said. Again, I think that there was only actually one such case, right, where the committee was decidedly in favor, and I said no. The fact that there was only one case out of almost 100 grants that the committee has reviewed does show that there is due deference and significant weight to what the committee thinks. I also always let the committee speak first. So when a grant comes in, I send it to the Grant Advisory Committee and I tell them to please offer an opinion. The reason I speak last, or the foundation speaks last, is that we really want people to feel comfortable responding with whatever they actually think about the grant, rather than worrying about, oh, the foundation has already said it's a good idea or a bad idea, you know, I shouldn't disagree. So we try not to create that primacy effect, right? Let the committee voice what it wants to say. This is, of course, part of the frustration of the process, because it's a volunteer committee. It sometimes takes them 5 days or 10 days to come up with some meaningful feedback, and only after that will you get my feedback, and only after that you might provide answers, and that's why some of these grant discussions can take a month. So this is basically my answer, right? In this case, I felt the concerns that were raised by the grants committee were addressed adequately by you. I invite all of you, by the way, to read this if you're interested. So this was actually a pretty interesting discussion. I think that the concerns that were raised were sort of anticipated concerns, right? They were what most Wikipedians would immediately say. Your idea is innovative and new and challenging to the status quo. And again, part of my role as a grant maker is to support innovation, is to recognize that this is a valuable opportunity. It may or may not work, it is a pilot project, but I'm interested in taking that risk. I'm interested in allowing this pilot project to offer the movement this chance to maybe evolve. And so that's the background to this decision.
Just to add as well that one of the things to remember when we are a community that is reviewing grants and thinking about the resources that we need is that it is often difficult to go against the status quo. It's very natural to sort of be in the space of comfort, right? And that is true for any community, and that is certainly true for Wikimedians as well. And part of what we want to do at the foundation is both support the status quo where it is being effective and challenge it where we think it's not. And so one of the things we are working at, is that the feedback? So one of the things we're working at is also to help our community members who are working on the grants advisory processes of every kind to think about strategy with us, not just to think about it as something that we hold at the foundation, but that we share across the movement. And it's part of a process that is ongoing, and Dumi again can talk about it, but even with the GAC, we're revamping and redesigning the process so that this is shared strategy. And that shared strategy is not just about how do we maintain status quo so we all feel comfortable, but how do we challenge ourselves when we know something is not working. And in this case, for instance, and Peter will talk about it later in the morning, I think it's a very important piece of how we go forward, which is challenging epistemology, challenging systems of knowledge. And as we know, for Africa, not just for Africa or Asia or Latin America, but for Europe and North America, challenging the status quo around written, peer-reviewed publications as the only method of systems of knowledge being acknowledged and credible is an important part of our movement and should be. So again, I think it's a very key and interesting challenge we have, but I do want us to think about part of what we're trying to do at the foundation, and especially on our team, is to think of shared strategy.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so I was wondering, do you have any specific time frames within which a grant has to be either approved or rejected?
So the guarantee we provide applicants to the Project and Event Grants program is that you would receive a decision within 30 days, unless the actual discussion has brought issues that still need addressing. Right, but you are generally guaranteed a decision in under a month. We often manage to make a decision within 2 or 3 weeks. Occasionally, a grant is very complicated, or an issue has come up that the applicant, the group requesting the grant, needs time to sort of get answers for. Right, so maybe someone on the advisory committee asked a question that they don't have the answer for, and they need 2 weeks to get that data, or to have an internal consultation or whatever. So that can sometimes draw out the decision. Generally, we are committed to 30 days, and assuming we were able to get answers in the conversation, we will make a decision within 30 days. That's in the Project and Event Grants program. The programs that have a strict schedule, a rigid twice-a-year schedule, actually have an even clearer timeline. There's a timeline by which your request has to come in, and then there's a timeline by which the committee will provide its feedback, and a time for community review and discussion, and then there is a specific date by which you will receive a decision. So it's a lot more rigid, and you will get a decision by that date.
The most important thing that I'd just like to leave you with is that when you're thinking about applying for a grant, or having an idea that you want to put up on the Idea Lab, I think the most important thing to remember is it's not about the sophistication of language, it's not about how wonderful your English is, it's about the idea, it's about the passion that you have, the commitment you have to the idea, and how you explain it. It's about being able to tell people why this matters to you, why it should matter to the movement, and how should we know, right? How should we know that it matters? So
specifically, you don't have to submit requests in English. In fact, those of you who speak French or Arabic, you can submit requests in your language, and we will do whatever translation is necessary to facilitate that discussion and give you your grant. So if you're not comfortable making the request in English, or you feel you can better express your goals, your plans in your own language, that is very welcome. You will notice that most of these requests are in English. It's certainly easier for us, but we do accept requests in any language. Yes, any language.
But apart from Klingon,
all languages allowed on Wikimedia, right?
let's not go there. There's an incubator, right? But I think the important thing as well to add to that is we accept in all languages. We will support you on it. But also that if you're nervous about your idea, you're not sure about it being on Wiki immediately, reach out to us. We would like to hear from you. We will be happy to talk to you by email, by Skype, by phone, talk through the idea, and then help you put it on Wiki in whatever form you feel comfortable. So it's not as though you need to start there if you're not sure of it. The end result will obviously be on Wiki, because that's part of the values of our movement and the transparency and accountability we all hold very dear, but it doesn't have to start there. And for those of us who are new to the process especially, please feel free to reach out to Asaf, to me, to Alex, to anybody else on the Foundation's grant-making team. We're a small team, but we're very, very open and happy to hear from you. And all you have to do is to go onto the Wikimedia Foundation staff page, and you'll find all our profiles and the ways to reach us.
Yeah, in fact, now it occurs to me, I think the Indaba grant was first mentioned to me during Wikimedia DC, is that correct? Ayla and David, I think, were there, and sort of approached me with this idea of a Pan-African conference, etc. And that was before there was a grant proposal. They just walked up to me at a conference and ran that idea by me, and we talked about it a little, and I asked what it would be about and what it would hope to achieve, etc. And then I said, okay, that sounds good. Go ahead and create a grant proposal. Go ahead and draft a proposal. And they did, and there was a process around it, and in the end it got postponed. But then there was another grant proposal, and it got accepted, and here we are. So by all means, take advantage of that. You can just email us. You can just ask for a Skype call, whatever you need. We're happy to discuss with you. And Dumi has agreed to also share a few thoughts as a member of the Grant Advisory Committee from his perspective as both grantee, repeat grantee, and grant evaluator in the Grant Advisory Committee.
Okay, so I have been a grantee for the past 3 years, I think, and in the Grant Advisory Committee for the past 18 months. And both have been quite interesting experiences. So the first thing I want to say to all of you who are going to or thinking about applying for grants in the future is, firstly, you need to believe in what you want to apply for. Believe that it's right, it is something that will assist you in what you need to achieve as a movement, and go after it. There will always be questions about why you want to spend a specific amount of money on a specific item. And most often than not, there will be members inside the committee who might not understand that grant application initially, which is why you need to keep in touch with the grant as you apply on the top page. Just put that on your watch list and keep checking it. Who has said what and what information is still required, and go back there and clarify things. In some cases, there will be unique situations which are only unique to your country, like a taxi from one point to the next costs 3 times more than what it would cost in a different country, and someone doesn't understand that. It is up to you to explain that. This is the case. This is what I am facing on the ground, and I really need to fund that item to be able to achieve my goal. And eventually, people will begin to understand. As a grant advisory committee member from a developing side of the world, it's been quite an eye-opening experience, and I think I was able to bring in a different point of view to what's currently there. If someone in India is looking for a grant to do something on, say, bad life, and they're not a member of a chapter, what is their responsibilities in terms of accountability? Can one person apply for a grant as an individual if there is a chapter in that country? Things like that are complex issues that we need to talk about. And most often than not, it's justifiable, but you have to go in there and justify. The other item I want to say is the Grant Advisory Committee gives an advice. At the end of the day, it is up to the Wikimedia Foundation, who are entitled and actually have the responsibility to look after the donations that are being sent, or the funds that are being put in to make our programs work, to decide on which is the best items to fund at what time. So, but the good thing about it is that it's all in an open platform. You can go back and see what happened through that grant, what was the reasons it was funded, what were the reasons it was not funded, and learn from it, which is what I actually did. I went through a lot of previous grants that were being applied, especially for Wikilab's monuments, which was a new thing for us. We had no clue. What do we ask for? And some of the things we didn't include in the grant. So on our second application, we did add a little bit of an item called contingencies, so that we could find things we didn't think of while we were doing the grant application. But it's all about a learning process. You guys are here, you've got my contact details and so on. If you do need assistance in terms of applying for a grant in future, I'm available to assist. I'm online on Meta, and I also am in the grant advisory committee. I am available to assist you with your grant application. And I actually view the position or the function of a grant advisory committee is not only to advise the Wikimedia Foundation whether this is a good grant or not. It's actually to advise the applicants themselves on what is it that you can do to improve your grant application. What can you do to make it better? What is it that you have overlooked? And in most cases, it's not only about you asking a lot of money and cut it down. Sometimes it's about you're actually asking for too little amount of money. Are you really going to reach the objectives that you're looking for with that amount that you requested? And that's how I've viewed the responsibilities of being in the grant advisory committee. And obviously, as a grant applicant myself, I sort of see that grant is not going to work in that format. And I'm able to get that insight because we're running grants on a regular basis, and we are seeing what is failing and what is succeeding. So it's been quite an eye-opening experience for me. So my advice to you is dive in head first. You sort things out as you go along, and you will actually learn while you do that. There is no better teacher than experience, especially in this case. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. The good thing that we enjoy as a movement, which is probably not true about other movements, is that we do everything in an open platform. So it is a chance for us to critically look at the work that we're doing and ask ourselves, are we actually achieving, getting impact from the projects that we're running? And if we are not, then we can improve it. Or we could decide, okay, it's not worth doing that, we abandon it, and we move on to other things that have worked in the past. But yes, it's been quite interesting. Thanks.
He deserves a round of applause. And these were very valuable to everyone to realize that when you apply for a grant and receive a grant, you are not making a commitment to succeed. That's not expected. Of course, we hope that all grants succeed. We hope that all projects have tremendous fruit. But when we give you a grant, it means, like I said, that we think there is a good chance of making progress on our mission through your work. We think there's a good chance. We're giving you the money to try, to do your best. And what we ask is accountability, right? We ask for a report. We ask that if it didn't work, you tell us how and why it didn't work. You give us that learning. Maybe we will know better. Next time something like this comes up, we will say, well, there was this thing and that didn't work. How are we going to change it? How are we going to do it differently this time? So that's learning, and that's valuable for us. Experience, as Dumi said, is one of the best teachers. Failure is also a teacher, right? So we will certainly try not to repeat failures. We will certainly try not to repeatedly fund really bad ideas. But occasionally, we will fund something that in retrospect turns out to have been a bad idea. That's okay. That's part of grant making. And no grant maker will tell you that all of their grants are a smashing success. So I want you to keep this in mind. You don't commit to achieve all the results. You don't commit to success, and you don't need to lie or present a good front when you give us the report. We actually take into account that some things won't work as planned. That's fine.
It's not just about Grantmaking, it's about anything you do. You will fail. The question is, how can you fail better the next time?
Right. Peter, another question?
Yeah. Never mind. I think I've got a loud voice. Just two very short things. At first, I do not completely agree with what you said before. That you said, all right, doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be nice. We'll consider it anyway. There is psychology in people's minds, and food that looks good also tastes better. You know. Okay, now I need to turn down, otherwise our ears fall off. So I think you can make a point in a grant application if you think it through before. Maybe you want to consult before with Dumi or whomever you know from the grant advisory committee, or with me. I just have had a grant and I've discussed many other grants with Wikipedians. So I think I can give you a few hints of what to avoid and what not to do. So yes, I know you're accommodating.
What can I actually apply for? And it's all there, and it's fancy, but what can I apply for? So I did ask this question to Asaf online. We're planning to do a team meeting. We're just going to discuss Wikilab's monuments. We're going to plan for it, but and we're going to also write a report about the one that we've done before. Can I apply for a grant to fly one of our project coordinators, Laurie at the time, to Johannesburg so that we could actually finish this thing? The answer was yes. I mean, it is something that you can apply for. So in most cases, it doesn't have to be a big grant application with hundreds of people that are going to be meeting in a single place. It could be a small thing like you wanted to do a short training session for 5 or 6 people who will meet at one place, and they are not able to get there by themselves. They will need a taxi fare or something to get there. And you want to give them coffee or something while they're there. Or you want to buy pins so that you can give it to them when they get there. And it's probably going to be about $100 worth of amount that you need. You can apply for that. It doesn't have to be a big program that you need 6 months to prepare for. Small things do make a huge difference in terms of outcomes, and those are the actually most effective ones that we should be funding, in my view.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good observation, and we have funded this sort of thing. In your case, in the case of Wikimedia Canada, for example, a huge country that had very few editors in each of the major cities, so literally separated by the entire continent, and they needed a way to get together. They needed, so we funded a physical meeting at one point, and then after that they said, well, maybe now that we've sort of met and got to know each other, we can do teleconferencing, but we need to pay for some stable teleconferencing service because Hangouts don't work for us or whatever, and we did that. We funded that for them. We recently agreed to fund flying a Wikipedian in Pakistan from one city to another to join the rest of the just approved Wikimedia Community User Group Pakistan in planning their Wikilabs monuments this year. Right, so we're happy to accommodate these small, simple logistics and expenses. It doesn't, as Dumi said, it doesn't have to be a grand project with great photo opportunities. It can be just the things that you need to do your work. Please don't hesitate. Yolanda has a question.
Yes, sorry, I'm not there. I was just wondering if you can, yesterday you were mentioning some of the grants that have been, yesterday you were mentioning also in the list some of the grants which have been focused on Africa or linked to Africa. I was wondering if you can provide us also some more data about what is the amount of funding that the foundation is providing or is supporting projects on the continent, and compared to the overall budget?
I could. I don't have that number ready, but I could just look at those few grants and sum them up together. So in a few minutes, I can give you that answer. Yeah. Other questions? All right.
What I can say overall, Yolanda, which might be useful as Asaf finds exactly.
It was an aggressive remark, so it was not a polite comment to receive an information. I have to admit, sorry to be unpolite. So to me, it's like, according to this number, what is your opinion? So that was what I was meaning with this question. So
right.
It was absolutely ideologically oriented. So please.
No, and it's a good point to make. And part of what is an interesting process right now is that there are two things, right? One is that the Wikimedia movement has been very European and North American in its history. So, for instance, right now, 60% for most of my life, it's very hard to think about contributors who are supporting women's rights if they don't know what the laws of violence in that country are, right? So it's just that framing that I offer. Especially as someone who is both outside and inside and out. Someone who has worked with many different communities and who cares deeply about the mission.
Yesterday, Asaf highlighted a point that sometimes we say no. You know, Wikimedia Foundation is relying on donors. So sometimes we say no. What causes us to say no?
Excellent question. So our mission is to create and share free knowledge. And that's a very, very wide mission. There's literally an infinity of projects and programs that you can propose that falls under that mission. Nevertheless, some people still have an idea that doesn't fall outside of that mission. It's just not about creating and sharing free knowledge. It's about some other thing. Just to give a simple example, if someone wants to feed the poor, that's a noble and good thing to do, but it's just not what we do. It's not our mission. It's not what we are about. It's not what our donors paid us to do, right? So if someone wants to create a Feed the Poor program, we are not the right foundation to fund it, right? But the more interesting case is when it is about free knowledge in one way or another. But the proportion between investment and likely impact, or the environmental context in which the program is proposed, doesn't make sense. So you could spend any amount of money trying to make something happen. I have a responsibility over those donor funds to make sure they are used reasonably efficiently. I need to make sure that the opportunities that I am funding, and it does in the end come at the expense of other things that we could be doing, are reasonable investments with a reasonable chance of achieving impact. I will give you a concrete example from Africa when I have said no. So about a year and a half ago, I think, a Wikimedian, an inactive Wikimedian from Kenya has requested funding for a proposed partnership with the National Archive in Kenya. And he has already had conversations with the National Archive, and he assured us that they are very interested in having some kind of Wikipedian in Residence partnership. Now, a Wikipedian in Residence, in our understanding, is an experienced Wikipedian person who has experience and good standing in the community, who can be the liaison, the go-between the institution, the archive in this case, and the community. And that experience is needed because that person would have to explain to the director of the National Archive or the curator why this contribution got reverted, or why this article that is a glaring hole in the coverage of the National Archives assets does not get written today. You know, what's keeping those Wikipedians? You need someone with an understanding of the community and of community processes. You need someone who can figure out how to find an admin to handle something on the wiki. And so you need an active, experienced Wikipedian. Additionally, you need a community when you create such a partnership, right? So you are, I forgot to mention, that Wikimedian wanted to be that Wikipedian residence. So he was basically asking for funding to pay for his own salary from the National Archive. And at the time, there were almost no active editors in Kenya. I think around 2 or 3 active editors in Kenya, and he wasn't one of them. And he was not even in touch with those 2 or 3 active editors. Didn't even know they were. And so I was thinking to myself, if we fund this, if we put our movement's brand and good name behind this project, and this guy shows up at the National Archive, makes all kinds of promises, and then how would he deliver on that partnership? How would he actually generate the results that the National Archive would be justified in expecting, based on what they hear, happened at the British Museum or the National Archive of the United States, all these high-profile Wikipedian in residence partnerships. I did not have faith in that formerly active Wikipedian's ability to bring the community into that partnership. And I did not have faith in the existence of a large enough local editing community who would show up at the National Archive to take pictures and look at documents and to train the staff of the National Archive, if not in actual editing, then at least in sort of, how to read Wikipedia. Even that takes some training, right? How to look at Wikipedia, how it works. Very often those museum professionals are not actually interested in editing, but they are interested in better understanding how it works. I just didn't see who is going to do this work. What I saw was someone trying to arrange for a position for himself without actually having done enough of the legwork, enough of the actual community engagement work. So I said no. I deeply disappointed that Wikipedia. But you can read all about it, it's in public. I can send you a link to this. You can see me making all these arguments in public. And you can see what he responded, what his take was. And I made a decision not to fund this. But I will stand behind this and say, I have a long-standing disagreement with Yolanda on this. I feel I have funded every fundable opportunity in Africa, every reasonable investment, including risky investments, including things that we were not sure would work. We took a chance. And we funded everything that had a reasonable chance to work and everything that was consistent with our community norms. Frankly, I find some of the other work that other organizations have done in Africa to be work that I would not have funded. That's okay. I didn't fund it. Other organizations did fund it. That's fine. We have different approaches. Some of that work, I think, does not really adhere to our community norms. That's okay. Other people think differently. But I can tell you, and I stand behind every decision I've made on Africa. You can look at the list of grants that I've shown you, go over every one. You will see that the vast majority has been funded. And you will see my arguments when I said no. I think there were maybe 2 grants from Africa that I said no to.
I think the point is not about, I think it's a good question, Bobby, that you asked about when it is a no. And coming back to what Yolanda said, it's not about what has or hasn't been funded so far. Part of what the hope for this community and this gathering is the roadmap that you create together, right? And there are a bunch of us in the